The world expected another emotional tell-all. What they got instead was a masterclass in silence, strength, and setting boundaries. When Keanu Reeves sat across from Oprah on live TV, no one imagined he'd flip the interview. No shouting. No tears. Just calm wisdom that left even Oprah speechless. This wasn't an interview. It was a quiet revolution. In the world of television, few names command the kind of emotional gravity that Oprah Winfrey does. For decades, her interviews have become iconic, peeling back the layers of celebrities and public figures, drawing out their deepest vulnerabilities on national television. But when Keanu Reeves stepped onto her stage, something unprecedented happened. Known for his quiet humility, tragic backstory, and almost monk-like approach to fame, Keanu wasn't there to perform. He wasn't looking to cry on cue or spill secrets for ratings. He came with something far more powerful: boundaries. What followed wasn't a traditional interview. It was a subtle power shift, a quiet stand against the modern media's hunger for spectacle. Oprah asked the questions. But Keanu? He asked the world to pause, to reflect, and to reconsider what authenticity really looks like. This is the story of how one man, without raising his voice, redefined the rules of conversation, and in the process, left even Oprah stunned. The calm before the storm. A gentleman meets the queen of talk. The stage was set, gleaming under warm studio lights. The signature golden O shimmered in the background, a symbol known worldwide for drama, confession, and transformation. For decades, millions had watched this set as the world's most powerful personalities were peeled layer by the queen of talk herself, Oprah Winfrey. But today's guest was different. Keanu Reeves. The mere mention of his name sparked curiosity. He was the enigma of Hollywood, a man who made millions in blockbusters, yet still took the subway like any other citizen. He'd been through unimaginable loss, yet smiled with the humility of a monk. He was revered, not for outbursts or scandals, but for a quiet nobility that puzzled the very industry he dominated. Backstage, Keanu sat in solitude. He wore a simple black suit. No flashy watches. No personal entourage. Just a cup of herbal tea resting in his hands and a gentle rhythm of breath that matched the calm before a storm. A producer knocked gently on the dressing room door. "Mr. Reeves? 2 minutes." He nodded with a soft, "Thank you," placed the tea on the side table, and stood up slowly, like a warrior preparing for a different kind of battle, not one of fists or bullets, but of words and soul. The entrance. The crowd erupted as Oprah walked onto the stage, glowing with practiced charisma. "Ladies and gentlemen, today, I am thrilled, truly honored, to welcome someone who rarely sits down for interviews. He's a star, a philosopher, and dare I say, a mystery. Please welcome Keanu Reeves." Applause shook the studio. Keanu walked onto the stage with his trademark half-smile and slightly bowed head, hands politely clasped in front of him. He waved once to the crowd, then shook Oprah's hand and took a seat. "Welcome, Keanu," Oprah began warmly. "Thank you for having me," he replied, voice low and sincere, setting the vibe. For the first few minutes, the tone was light and respectful. They talked about his recent film, a breathtaking blend of action and heart that had once again proven Keanu's staying power in an industry hungry for the next big thing. "You do your own stunts," Oprah said, eyes wide. "You must be insane." Keanu chuckled softly. "Maybe a little. But there's something beautiful about really being inside the moment, not acting it, but living it." The crowd nodded, smiling. Oprah leaned in. "You always come off so grounded. Tell me something, how do you stay humble when everyone around you is worshipping you?" Keanu paused, then replied, "Because I don't believe the hype. None of it. The good or the bad. I've seen how fragile it all is." Applause. Oprah smiled. She was enjoying this. Her guest was eloquent, charming, yet he held something back. A wall. A calm, zen-like distance. And Oprah, the master of cracking open shells, felt the familiar pull, the need to go deeper. The gentle probe. "You've been through a lot," she said, shifting tone slightly. Keanu's smile faded just a little. "You lost your best friend, River Phoenix, early on, and then your daughter, and later, your partner Jennifer. That's a lot of grief. How did you manage that?" The audience went quiet. No one coughed. No phones clicked. It was as though the entire room held its breath. Keanu looked down for a moment. Not in shame or discomfort, more like someone touching a scar that had long since healed, but never disappeared. "Grief changes shape," he said softly. "It doesn't go away. You learn to live with it, to walk alongside it." Oprah leaned forward, sensing the shift. "Did you ever feel angry at the universe? At God?" Keanu blinked. His eyes, dark and thoughtful, met hers directly for the first time. "I've never found anger helpful. Pain is a companion, not an enemy." The response silenced the room again. Even Oprah looked momentarily unsure of where to go next. Audience reaction. Whispers in the audience turned to awe. "He's like a monk," one young woman whispered to her friend. "No Hollywood BS," the friend replied. "He's real." Behind the scenes, even the production crew felt the atmosphere shift. The usual excitement of live TV had taken on a spiritual weight. The wall of boundaries. Oprah, ever the professional, pressed gently. "But don't you think talking about those things helps others heal too? Isn't sharing pain part of the gift you have, this platform you have?" Keanu didn't flinch. He turned his head slightly, tilting it with a philosopher's grace, and responded in a voice clear and precise. "I think healing happens in silence too. In holding space, not just filling it with words." Oprah blinked. "Could you elaborate?" He leaned back. "When my partner passed, and I had to go on set a week later, people kept asking, 'Are you okay?' And I knew they meant well. But every time they asked, it was like reliving it. Like picking at a wound. A few gasps. A few nods. So I started to appreciate people who just sat with me. Said nothing. Didn't need the details. They just made space. That was healing. The unspoken tension. There it was, the shift. Keanu was kind. Polite. But a line had been drawn. He was here to speak, yes. But not to bleed. And Oprah, sensing it, paused. Not in defeat, she wasn't one to back down, but in acknowledgement. Keanu Reeves was not a subject to be dissected. He was a soul who had already survived the blade. Laughter and levity. Sensing the gravity of the moment, Oprah pivoted. "I heard you gave away millions of your Matrix salary to the stunt team. Is that true?" Keanu smiled again, this time a little wider. "Well, I figured they were the real heroes. I just got the close-ups." Laughter erupted in the audience. "You're like the anti-celebrity," Oprah said. "Maybe," Keanu said. "Or maybe we've just forgotten how to be human in public." Boom. Another quote that would light up the internet before the interview even finished airing. The curtain falls, for now. As the first segment came to a close, Oprah leaned in for a final comment before the commercial break. "You know, I don't think I've ever had a guest say so much, while saying so little." Keanu nodded. "Sometimes less is more." The audience clapped. The camera zoomed in on Keanu's face. Composed. Completely in control. The man had entered a space meant for drama and bared his truth without tears, breakdowns, or confessions, only clarity. Behind the curtains. As they went to commercial, Oprah glanced at her producers offstage. She didn't say a word, but her expression said enough. This wasn't going to be the interview she controlled. And for the first time in years, she was intrigued. Keanu stood, walked off stage, and returned briefly to his dressing room. He didn't check his phone. Didn't scroll. He just sat, sipping the now cool tea, looking inward, as if knowing that what had just happened was only the beginning. Digging too deep, Oprah pushes the line. The studio lights returned, softer now, more intimate. The second segment of the show had begun. The camera zoomed in, slowly capturing the faces of two powerful individuals. Oprah Winfrey, the queen of emotional excavation, and Keanu Reeves, the man who had just stunned her audience not with sensationalism, but with calm restraint. The crowd settled. The applause faded. The silence in the studio was almost sacred. And Oprah, ever the seasoned interviewer, knew the next act of this performance would be different. She had probed, gently. She had touched the surface of the pain. But now, she wanted depth. She wanted tears. Or at least a moment of trembling, something visceral for the world to latch onto. Because that was her gift, to make emotion happen on cue. Except this time, she was dealing with a man who had nothing to sell and nothing to prove. A deeper cut. Oprah leaned in again. "You spoke earlier about loss," she began, her voice lowered, more maternal now. "And you did so, poetically. But I want to ask, not to push, but to understand, how did those experiences change the way you see life?" Keanu nodded thoughtfully. "There's a line," he said slowly, "between existing and living. When you lose the people you love, that line becomes crystal clear." Oprah nodded. She was still with him. Keanu continued. "I don't chase happiness anymore. I don't chase success. I just try to be present, whether I'm buying groceries or filming a scene. Because I know, all of it can disappear. Instantly." His voice didn't tremble. His eyes didn't water. But the truth in his words silenced the entire room. The tipping point. But Oprah wasn't done. She glanced at a card on the table, a cue from her producers. It was a sensitive topic, one that had never been fully addressed in public. "You've said very little about the accident that took Jennifer's life," she said softly. "Do you think you ever truly recovered from it?" Keanu inhaled slowly. Not sharply. Not dramatically. Just enough to let anyone paying attention know, this was the line. He looked at her, not coldly, but with deliberate stillness. "Does anyone recover from loss, Oprah? Or do we just learn to carry it better?" Oprah paused. She had been expecting pain. She received wisdom instead. "Still," she pressed. "But don't you think people watching, people who've suffered something similar, maybe they want to hear the raw part? The breakdown, the anger, the ugly." Keanu tilted his head slightly, as though he had heard this line of thinking before, from therapists, directors, even journalists. "I don't believe pain should be a performance," he said. "And I don't owe the world my wounds just because I'm known." The audience reaction. The studio audience didn't clap this time. They sat still. Spellbound. It was as if Keanu had taken a mirror and held it up to every heart in the room, exposing their quiet need to see someone else cry, to feel less alone in their own suffering. One woman in the front row wiped away a tear, not because Keanu was crying, but because he wasn't. Because his strength felt like permission to be strong, too. Oprah's internal conflict. Oprah sat back for a moment. This wasn't how it usually went. Most guests cracked. Most offered more the longer the camera rolled. Most needed to be seen, understood, comforted. But Keanu was comforting them. Oprah blinked, then smiled gently. "I have to say, you're not what I expected." Keanu raised an eyebrow, amused. "What were you expecting?" "Honestly, a little more mess." He chuckled, the first real laugh since the show began. "Well, the mess is there," he said. "I just don't put it on stage." Shifting gears again. Oprah changed strategy. "If you don't mind me asking, do you still believe in love?" A question meant to soften him, humanize him. Keanu looked out toward the audience for a moment before answering. "Yes. Absolutely. Even after everything. Especially after everything." The way he said it, not dramatic, not romanticized, it felt more like a vow than a statement. The kind of line that would go viral within minutes. Oprah leaned forward. "And do you want it again? In your life?" Keanu smiled, but it was tinged with something deeper. Longing, maybe. Or acceptance. "I think love isn't something you chase," he said. "It's something you welcome, when the time is right. Like the sun rising. You don't make it happen. You just let it in." The control shift. This was not an interview anymore. Keanu had turned it into a conversation. A dialogue of equals. No crying. No emotional breakdowns. Just truth, handled with the same grace one uses to carry a fragile glass through a crowded room. And Oprah was disarmed. For the first time in the show, she blinked slowly. Paused. Let silence sit. Behind the scenes. Backstage, the control room was buzzing. One of the producers whispered, "He's flipping the format, and it's working." Another added, "We were aiming for ratings." He's giving us something timeless. Even Oprah's assistant, who had prepped countless shows, murmured, "This one's different." Closing the segment, Oprah leaned into the final part of the second act. "You've become almost mythological to people. A hero, a monk, a ghost. But at the end of the day, who is Keanu Reeves?" He smiled. "Someone still figuring it out." Laughter. Applause. But then he added, "And someone who's okay, not being fully understood." A beat passed. That line struck deeper than any revelation could have. It told the audience something many had never considered. You don't need to bleed publicly to be authentic. You don't need to explain your trauma to earn empathy. Sometimes, boundaries are the deepest form of self-respect. The real moment. Just before the next break, Oprah went off script. "One last thing," she said, eyes softening. "If Jennifer were here, and you could say anything to her, right now, in this moment, what would you say?" It was the boldest move yet. Keanu looked at her. Time paused. And then he said, simply, "I hope you found peace." Nothing more. No tears. No silence for effect. Just that, a single sentence carrying the weight of a lifetime. Oprah's eyes shimmered. She nodded. No follow-up. No drama. She respected that answer enough to let it linger. Fade to commercial. As the lights dimmed and the commercial break began, Keanu stood slowly, giving Oprah a polite smile. She nodded back, something in her demeanor now softened. She had tried to dig, but he had planted seeds instead. In the moments between segments, the audience buzzed with quiet reflection. One woman whispered to her friend, "He didn't expose anything, and still said everything." Backstage moment. Backstage, a young assistant brought Keanu a fresh cup of tea. He accepted it with a quiet thank you, then sat in his dressing room again, breathing slowly. He had walked into the lion's den, and turned it into a temple. The moment of truth. Keanu flips the interview. The stage lights brightened again as the third segment began. But something in the room had shifted. The energy was no longer Oprah's. The rhythm, the tone, the emotional control, it all subtly leaned toward Keanu. Not because he was trying to take over, but because his very presence had transformed the space. Calm had replaced curiosity. Reflection had replaced interrogation. Oprah sensed it. She had led thousands of interviews. Politicians, actors, survivors, billionaires, all of them had eventually yielded to her style. But Keanu Reeves, without ever raising his voice or rejecting a question, had done something different. He'd redrawn the invisible lines. And now, she had a choice to make: push harder and risk losing her guest, or pivot and meet him where he stood. She chose one more attempt to test the boundaries. The final dig. Oprah folded her hands and leaned in, voice soft but deliberate. "You know, Keanu, I think what makes you so compelling is that you've mastered the art of holding back. But don't you think, just sometimes, we have to surrender?" A direct challenge. The kind of question that demanded emotional vulnerability, the crack in the mask, the tear that betrays inner truth. Keanu didn't flinch. He didn't blink. Instead, he offered a quiet smile. "I think surrender is powerful," he replied. "But only when it's voluntary." Oprah tilted her head. "And this, today, is this voluntary?" His smile widened just slightly. "I came here because I respect you. But I also came here with a choice, what to share and what to protect. That's not resistance. That's self-awareness." A soft gasp rippled through the crowd. The audience could feel it. This wasn't just an interview anymore. This was a lesson. The table turns. Oprah chuckled, acknowledging the moment. "You're turning into the interviewer now," she said. Keanu's eyes twinkled. "Maybe we all need to be, especially with ourselves." The line hit differently. Even Oprah sat back for a second, surprised. "Okay," she said, playfully. "If you were interviewing me, what would you ask?" The audience laughed. It was a disarming moment, and Oprah likely expected Keanu to laugh it off. But he didn't. He took a breath. And asked, "When did you stop feeling safe being vulnerable off camera?" The studio went silent. Even the cameraman froze. Oprah's smile faltered, not in discomfort, but in recognition. Keanu had gently, almost invisibly, turned the mirror around. She looked at him, eyes scanning his face for intent. But there was no malice. No challenge. Just curiosity. The same kind she had used on others for decades. Oprah exhaled, then nodded slowly. "That's a powerful question," she admitted. Keanu didn't follow up. He waited. And in that pause, something rare happened. Oprah Winfrey hesitated to speak. A pause in power. Finally, she answered. "There was a time," she said, "when I thought I had to be the strong one for everyone. My audience. My team. My guests. So I stopped showing my cracks. I started turning pain into structure. Into scripts. Into segments." She paused. And after a while, it became who I was. The honesty rang out through the room like a prayer. Keanu nodded. "You became the lighthouse." Oprah looked at him. "But lighthouses don't move. They just stand there, shining. And sometimes," Keanu added, "they need someone to shine back at them." A beat. It wasn't just a reversal of roles. It was healing, mutual, respectful, and unscripted. The truth that resonates. The audience, which had sat in reverent silence, now erupted into applause, not for a dramatic answer, but for a shared human moment. Keanu didn't bask in it. He simply looked down, thoughtful. The moment wasn't about victory. It was about truth. Oprah's eyes glistened, but not from being exposed. She had just experienced the very thing she'd spent decades giving others: space. The real conversation. The interview moved into a different gear. Oprah leaned forward, newly open. "Why do you think people are so afraid of silence?" she asked. Keanu replied, "Because silence is where the truth waits. And most of us aren't ready to hear it." "And yet," she smiled, "you seem to live in it." "I don't fear it," he said. "I just listen to what it has to say." They talked now not as host and guest, but as two souls navigating the strange terrain of fame, grief, and purpose. The viral moment. Toward the end of the segment, Oprah asked, "Do you think pain is necessary for wisdom?" Keanu thought for a moment, then said, "No. But facing pain honestly, that's where wisdom begins." The crowd erupted. Cameras zoomed. Producers grinned backstage. They knew this clip would go viral before the show even ended. Memes. Reaction videos. Headlines like, "Keanu Reeves turns Oprah's interview into a masterclass on boundaries." "Who interviewed who?" "Keanu's calm outsmarts TV's toughest host." "Silence Speaks," the interview that changed daytime television. But Keanu didn't seem to care. He was just present. After the shift. As the third segment wrapped, Oprah extended her hand across the table. "Thank you," she said, sincerely, "for showing us another way." Keanu shook her hand gently. "Thank you for listening." It was such a simple exchange, but it landed with the weight of something historic. For the first time in a long time, a guest hadn't been cracked open by Oprah. He hadn't resisted, either. He had simply reframed the entire experience. The audience exit. As the audience began filing out, people whispered to each other. He didn't say much, but he said everything. "Why did I feel like I was being interviewed? Now I want to be more like him." Backstage, the afterthought. Backstage, Oprah sat quietly in her private lounge. She watched a replay of that one moment, the question Keanu had asked her. She didn't rewind it for ego. She rewound it because it made her think. When did she stop being vulnerable? When did she become the lighthouse and forget to move? She smiled, a little sad, a little grateful. In her decades of interviewing others, she had finally been truly seen. Aftermath. The internet reacts and a new respect is born ****. The final segment of the show faded out not with applause or a standing ovation, but with something far more rare: silence. It was the kind of silence that lingered long after the cameras stopped rolling. The kind of silence that made people check their hearts, not their phones. For once, a talk show wasn't about entertainment. It was about presence, grace, and boundaries. Keanu Reeves had exited the stage just as he'd entered it, quietly, politely, without grand gestures or soundbites. But the impact he left behind? That was seismic. Backstage reverberations. In the control room, producers stared at the monitors, some blinking back unexpected tears. Oprah's chief showrunner, a seasoned professional who had worked with her for 20 years, leaned back in her chair and whispered, "What just happened?" Another replied, "I think he redefined what it means to be interviewed." Even Oprah's personal assistant, who had been live posting updates during the show, stopped typing for a full minute. "He didn't give us drama," she said. "He gave us dignity." Oprah reflects. Back in her dressing room, Oprah sat quietly, still in her chair. She wasn't reviewing the footage or checking headlines. She was just thinking. The question Keanu had asked her, "When did you stop feeling safe being vulnerable off camera?" echoed louder now that the lights had dimmed. It wasn't just a good question. It was the kind of question that required courage to ask and even more courage to answer. She wasn't upset. Not embarrassed. Just shifted. Because for the first time in many years, she had been seen, not as a media titan or cultural icon, but as a woman who had long since put her own emotions in a vault, while opening everyone else's on live television. The internet erupts. Within minutes of airing, clips from the interview were everywhere. Twitter, now X, exploded. At Woke Cinema. This isn't an interview. It's a therapy session disguised as a masterclass in boundaries. Keanu Reeves, Oprah. Feminist wisdom. When a man says, "I don't perform my pain," and it lands with more power than any crying breakdown ever could. Keanu just changed the game. Stoic Soul 84. Keanu Reeves didn't just protect his privacy, he elevated the conversation. With stillness. With class. With philosophy. Wow. YouTube clips were trending within the hour. Keanu's calm destroys the modern interview format. 3.5 million views. Why Oprah looked shaken after one question from Keanu. 5.2 million views. This is how you set boundaries like a stoic. 7.9 million views. The top comment on most of the videos read, "He didn't speak more. He spoke better." Global media response. Major publications chimed in. The New York Times. Keanu's Oprah moment. A new standard for on-camera integrity. The Guardian. How Keanu Reeves outclassed the most powerful interviewer in America, without raising his voice. Time magazine. Quiet power. The viral interview that's making everyone rethink vulnerability. Psychologists and therapists even began referencing the interview in discussions on emotional intelligence and trauma-respectful dialogue. Fans around the world react. In Tokyo, a Stoic philosophy professor played the interview for his students as an example of modern-day Stoicism in action. In Brazil, a podcast titled Real Men Feel dedicated an entire episode to Keanu's refusal to perform pain for the sake of ratings. In Kenya, a youth mental health advocate wrote an open letter online. "Thank you, Keanu, for showing us that strength doesn't shout. Sometimes it just sits quietly and refuses to break." Oprah speaks out. 3 days later, Oprah released a brief video statement on her Instagram. She sat by a window, no makeup, hair pulled back. This wasn't production Oprah. This was the woman behind the machine. "There are moments in your career," she began, "where you expect to lead, and instead, you are led. I've interviewed presidents, survivors, spiritual masters, and icons. But what Keanu Reeves gave us wasn't a headline or a confession. He gave us a reminder that strength is not measured by what you reveal under pressure, but what you protect with intention. I didn't expect to be asked a question. I didn't expect it to stay with me days later. But I'm grateful. Truly. Thank you, Keanu, for reminding me, and all of us, that silence can be the most powerful voice of all." Her video garnered over 45 million views in 48 hours. Keanu's response? True to form, Keanu said little. He didn't post about the interview. He didn't respond to media requests for comment. He didn't give follow-ups or write an op-ed. He was spotted a week later in downtown Los Angeles, sipping coffee at a small outdoor cafe, reading a worn paperback copy of Letters from a Stoic by Seneca. A fan who approached him said, "You changed the whole internet with that interview." Keanu just smiled, shook his head lightly, and replied, I didn't change anything. I just stayed true to who I am. The cultural shift. The ripple effects continued for weeks. Other celebrities began pushing back against sensationalist interviews. A-list actors declined deep personal questions on late-night shows. A trending hashtag emerged: "Boundaries are power." Therapists began using the term Keanu response to describe a method of handling emotionally loaded situations with grace, brevity, and emotional self-protection. Legacy of the moment. Months later, when a respected interviewer was asked in a panel who gave the most memorable interview of the decade, she said, "Keanu Reeves on Oprah." Because it wasn't just about what was said. It was about what wasn't. And that taught me more about humanity than any monologue ever could. The closing scene. Back at the studio where it all began, Oprah's team framed a still photo from the show. It wasn't the moment of applause. It wasn't the emotional climax. It was that one still frame, Keanu, sitting peacefully, hands folded, eyes locked in gentle defiance, speaking with calm authority. Beneath it, a simple plaque read, "Sometimes, less is more." Keanu Reeves. And it was true. He didn't shout. He didn't cry. He didn't break down. But he shifted culture. Not with power, but with presence. Don't just watch, reflect. If this moment moved you, share it with someone who needs to hear the power of silence. Subscribe for more untold stories, honest moments, and voices that challenge the noise. Every view, every comment, every share helps amplify authenticity over performance. Be part of a community that values meaning over media. Hit the bell. The next story might just change you.